Previously on AgentPalmer.com, the autobiography of NASA flight director Gene Kranz, the good, the bad, and the ugly from 2 LEGO Mandalorian sets, and Jordan and I are still looking for a location for a potential venture into an LGS. This is the Palmer Files, episode 12, featuring Sara of the Many Hats. She's a professor, recapper, author, and genuinely fun person with at least 2 names, Netzley and Whitney. We discuss all of those things, plus writing, reading, romance, and even sports. Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 12th episode is Sara. Netzley to those of you who have learned from Dr. Sara, and also Netzley for those of you who listen to her as co-host of the DC TV Report, or read her recaps on EW.com, and Whitney to those of you who have read her novels of romance. This is precisely why I wanted to talk to Sara, her trichotomy of things, her trilogy of aspects, her 3-headed giant of careers. And I mean careers. While she's really making bread on one, she's talented enough to make her bread solely on any one of those things, but she still does all 3. I first met Sara through Bill Sweeney's Wicked Theory podcast spinoff Preacher vs. Preacher, a comparison companion podcast of the comic to the AMC television series. Sara was recapping Preacher for EW at the time of the first season, and through my connection to Bill and his shows, and Sara's Twitter interactions with Bill, we became acquainted. Then she and I became more acquainted after a phone call that we discussed during the episode you're about to listen to, and we've been friends since. So, what are you in for with this episode? A lot of different things. Romance, sports, communication theory, journalism, personas and personalities, passion projects, writing, reading, romance, comm theory, romance, and enough interesting asides that if this were a classroom, even the most tired of you would be attentive at the twists and turns in the discussion. Either that or I'm the guy in the classroom that keeps the professor talking while you were all hoping class would end early today. Sorry, but I'm not sorry. Sara is wonderful. So, if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, you can tweet the show at The Palmer Files, and you can tweet Sara at Sara Netzley or Sara Whitney _. You can also hear her on the DC TV Report with her co-host Little Eddie O'Hare, wherever you are listening to this show, and you can visit her websites, saranetzley.com or sarawhitney.com, depending on which Sara you're looking for. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and remember all of these links and those mentioned in the show will be available in the show notes. So, grab your notepads and pencils because class is in session, and this time, no one can be saved by the bell. Sara, you are a teacher, a recapper with both the written word and the audio stuff, and an author. So, do you have an order by which you like to go by? Like, when you introduce yourself, are you a professor first? Are you an author first? Does it depend on who you're talking to?
Wow, that's a great question to start because it brings in sort of the late stage capitalism of my brain and also the code switching that I do. But yeah, when I introduce myself just to general public, I'm a professor first because it's my day job and it's my salary, right?
Okay.
So that's what occupies the bulk of my time, the bulk of my waking daylight hours. But it kind of depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to someone in a fandom, for example, I might talk up the recapper first. Oh yeah, hey, I recap Supergirl for EW.com, or yeah, I do DC TV for a podcast I do with a buddy. And then of course, in the author circles, that is all in part because authors, and myself included, often use a pen name. So I talk up that more than anything else because my day job is not as important, or not as important. It affects and informs everything I do, but because that's not how I identify myself in my author voice and persona. You know, I'm an author first, and everything else is sort of shrouded in mystery. So, which is hilarious because I don't make any secret about my pen name. I just try to keep things separate for Google.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. I mean, when I launched the podcast was the first time I really listen. I didn't hide that I'm Jason. Mm-hmm. I never did. It's the first line in my about page on agentpalmer.com, but most people ignored it. So like when I come out in the intro here and say I'm Agent Palmer, Jason Sturshik, you know, it's kind of like I was that was my blurring of the lines, because before then, while it existed, I was Palmer. Like,
was that hard for you the first time you introduced yourself with both names so publicly?
No, yes and no, because I did like having separate spaces, because the job I had when I launched Palmer, I was writing for them too. So it was easier to be like, well, this is the shit I've written as Jason, and this is the stuff I've written as Palmer, and keep those worlds separate. But, you know, you can't do it forever. And when I started the proxy cast, if you will, right, and I was just guesting on all these shows, some of the early ones called me Jason anyway. Mm-hmm. Or if, you know, there were a couple instances where like one of the hosts knew me and one of them didn't. So one of them was like, oh, and here's our guest, Jason. And the other one would be like, that's Palmer.
I was going to say, I know you're Jason, but I 100% call you mentally and verbally Palmer. Just so you know. Yeah,
no, I mean, there are plenty of people that have started to become like closer than just internet acquaintances. And you're one of them that still just call me Palmer.
Well, and the funny thing is in the writer community and specifically, I mean, I write romance. Most of my writing circle writes romance. I have close friends I talk to every day, whether it's, you know, messenger, email, anything like that. I don't know their real names. I have no idea. I know their pen name, and I respect their right to privacy. And if they want to share it with me, great, but I'm not going to push it. There's a lot of people who have jobs that frown on outside work, or that kind of outside work, based on outdated perceptions and things like that. We can talk about that later. But yeah, it's so wild to me that there's this whole close friendships that develop with somebody who maybe is on her third or fourth pen name, and that's how I know her really, really well, but I have no idea who she is. I could pick her out of a lineup. You know, I know what she looks like. I just don't know her name.
Okay, so I skipped the second half of my junior year of high school to do a semester abroad in Israel. Mm-hmm. And when I came back, I skipped my senior year of high school as an early admit into college. And since I had just come back from Jerusalem with long hair and a beard, on campus for the 4 years I was there, I was Jesus. That was the nickname, okay? That was the nickname, all right?
Is that irony?
I mean, we weren't, to be fair, I don't think that the friends I had were trying to be ironic. It was just... and I don't know who started it either, by the way. Like I'd have to talk to a lot of people to find out, but around campus, I was Jesus, right? And there's two stories I can tell about that. You know, one is my sophomore year, I was on the homecoming court, and I probably would have been homecoming king, but they put my real name on the ballot.
Oh,
and
nobody recognized you.
No, absolutely not. That's one. Two, my parents were at a function with a professor from my school, and they were like, oh, you might know our son, Jason. And they're like, no, I don't know that. And then my dad goes, you might know him by his nickname. They call him Jesus. And the professor's like, oh yeah, I totally know him. Right. Then I graduated and I ended up in retail working, unloading trucks. Right. And when you're doing that, you can wear, you know, there's not like a uniform, right? So I used to wear baseball t-shirts, like the jerseys, but they're t-shirts, because I had a bunch of them, right? So there's player names on the back. And one of the player names on the back was Gibbons. And I had worn other shirts and other players' shirts. It just so happened that at one point, somebody called me Gibby, and I was Gibby for the rest of my time at that store. Okay. So then I launch agentpalmer.com and I become, well, at first through like 7DAG, which was the first time it was ever said on a podcast, it was Agent Palmer. And then it was clear that that was too many syllables. That was going to get shortened. So it was just Palmer. Mm-hmm. And now I'm coming back out. But I tell this long story because what ends up happening is when I introduce Steph to my past, I have to let her know how they know me. Like, oh, this person knows me as Jesus. Like, or this person knows me as Jason. Or like this. So I'm not unfamiliar with answering to a name that's not Jason.
So let me ask you this. Is Jesus a different guy than Gibby, than Palmer, than Jason? Like, is one of those guys funnier? Is one more responsible? Does one have an interest that another,
No, it's funny. I may have responded to different, I've basically been the same. Mm-hmm. Like the personality never changes based on the name, which was probably one of the easier reasons that, like, when I launched the podcast, I could be like, I'm Jason, also known as Agent Palmer, because I'm not all of a sudden a geek. Or, oh no, I've never known anything about comics, but now I do. Like, no, I mean, I've always been the same guy. But I'm a big believer in branding. And second, I'm horrible myself at names. So if a nickname helps you remember me, then by all means, I'm okay with it. Because I will have to meet someone 5 times to get it.
Is this where you start calling me Susan? Is this where?
No. You're Sarah. You're Sarah. Because well, for you, it's one of those like podcast friends that get like closer to the inner circle. Like I've heard you introduced any 100 number of times on your own show, on other shows. So like then it just becomes like, it's the first couple conversations, right? Like I think you and our first conversation was when Gilmore Girls came out on Netflix.
That's right. And you were like, yeah, when you get done, you're going to need to call me.
Yeah, because Steph doesn't watch it, so I needed somebody to talk to about this.
And I had this moment of having to explain to my husband, yeah, I need to go call this guy from the internet. It's fine. It's not weird. It's fine. And he was like, okay, go call your guy from the internet. That seems perfectly normal and not a thing I'm going to worry about.
Well, it's funny. Like, that's kind of what we do now. And like in our circle, like I've, episode 10, Paula and I met each other on the internet and now she's like my sister. Like Grant, Bill, Ed, these guys are so close, but it's like, I mean, I could end up in a ditch somewhere. I'm taking a leap of faith, like kind of like you were saying, like, are all those people the same you? Like, I mean, Bill could turn the mics off and be a serial killer. I don't know.
Of everybody I've met through the podcasting world, yeah, Bill's probably the one most likely. No, I'm kidding. He's lovely. I got to meet Bill and Ed for the first time in person this summer when I was in New York. So that was exciting to actually get to, and I've met Steph. You're the only one I haven't met in the circle.
That's fair. I mean,
slacker.
It's true. But I will tell you, I have met Henno, and Steph's done a show with Henno for like a billion years and still hasn't met him. So
what? It's living in 2020, living in the future is so wild. The friends we've met, the friends we haven't met who are still friends, wild.
Yeah.
And when you talk about marketing and branding, that's interesting too. I find I now have double the social media accounts because I've got, Sara Netzley, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and then I've got Sara Whitney, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, author page, reader group. And so I will have a thought or see something funny or have a picture and think, is this a Whitney or a Netzley? What is Whitney, going to say about that? I kind of think of her as a she, which sounds disassociative. It's not. It's branding. Where does it belong? What do I say about it? So it has been interesting to kind of watch myself fine tune the persona and the communication styles because I have really stepped up my Whitney presence in the past 6 months. So I've seen this happen, and I've seen how I interact and who says what where and what gets shared and what doesn't. It is wild to me watching this all go down.
Are you the same? Like, are the two, because listen, and I know this from Palmer, like, you kind of get to recreate yourself if you want. And it's, I guess, to be fair, I took the coward's way out. I was myself, because recreating a new personality or profile would take way too much energy. Like, oh, Palmer can't say that. Only Jason can. Like, no. That's a lot.
I'm myself, but I'm different aspects of myself turned up or turned down, I would say.
Okay.
So Whitney's a little bawdier. My Sara Netzley Twitter is a lot more political and honest there. My Sara Netzley Facebook is a little more upbeat Pollyanna. So it's just, it's what are your audiences? Who's reading? My mom is reading my Facebook. People I know on Twitter are who are seeing me over there. My author persona, it's people I don't know who don't know me. So I try to be, the best, shiniest, most interesting, but I write romance. So you have a little element of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Look at them abs. Which I guess actually is my Netzley persona too. You know what? Just abs. Bill Sweeney once called me a legendary man-ogler, and that I wear that with pride. That's in my Twitter
It's
bios.
funny because Bill's the one who called me a proxy caster, and I still won't get rid of that.
Bill's the giver of nicknames. There's his nickname.
He's gonna want that shortened. I'm telling you right now.
He's the nicknamer.
The nicknamer. That's his Batman villain.
It is. Yeah.
Listen, we've talked about different jobs, different personas. So I want to go backwards. What did you want to be when you grew up? Because, if I were to say, like, you're a recapper or you're an author or you're a professor, either one of those three things is like, well, you're doing it. But, like, what did you, go back. Like, what did you want to? This is the least humble thing I've ever said. I was one of those kids where, your mom goes for parent-teacher conferences and every teacher says, she should study this in college. Oh, biology, she should definitely study. She should be pre-med. She should be studying Spanish. She should be. So I was one who was good at everything. I was, straight A kid, highly motivated, highly driven. In high school, kind of shifted to news and journalism, and I thought I was going to be a TV reporter. And then when I got to college, I realized that writing, and all along my whole life, I've had teachers say, you have a way with words. This is a gift. And I just, the emphasis on the written word in print journalism spoke to me so much. So I think something with words and then telling news stories with words has always been my direct shot there. And so, yeah, I'm a teacher. I'm a professor. I teach journalism. I teach mass comm. So that is still what I do. When I was thinking about, because you had told me we were going to talk, you kind of thought the trifecta of personalities would be kind of interesting. I was thinking, how do I bridge those beyond the writing aspect, the words aspect? And I have in a lecture that I do in my senior level journalism class every year, a quote from scholar Thomas Cahill that talks about how you can see the worldview of a people, their invisible fears and desires in a culture's stories. And I really think that my three hats that I wear, God, I hate that phrase. But the three things that I do, I think often it's about teasing out society's invisible fears and desires, but in these really different arenas. So journalism, what are the stories we focus on, whether it's news or features or what have you? So many of those are foregrounding and highlighting the stuff we're scared of, the stuff we desire. That's what we focus on. Recapping a little harder to make that distinction there, but I do think, we just finished Watchmen, and Watchmen was a marvelous show for allegorizing and bringing to the forefront a lot of cultural things that we need to address and talk about. You'll see, you're going to watch it soon. Well, all of those things are, it doesn't have to be ripped from the headlines to include current events. And I that it doesn't, whether it's Star Wars or Marvel, or it doesn't matter like what platform or franchise or even indie, like they're all, you can't watch anything now and like truly escape.
Well, and that's one of my favorite things that I teach every semester is I teach a media, race, and gender class, and I have included a unit on horror, which some of my students are just like, yes, horror. And other students say, I don't watch horror. I don't like horror. Please don't make me do this. But I do make them do this because I'm the professor. And it's because I think more than any other genre that I look at, certainly in media, race, and gender, oh my God, horror allegorizes and can find such fun, gross, amazing, scary ways to talk about fill in the blank. Consumerism, HIV/AIDS, terrorism, social communism, like the invasion of the body snatcher stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff there. Let's talk about what zombies mean in the late 90s, early aughts. We can, it's so good, so interesting. So that's the kind of stuff I love, and romance does it too. If you look at the way romance has evolved from the early incarnations and some of the ways that, of course, they could always have been better. Everything can always be better. News can be better. All kinds of fiction can be better. But early romance was reacting to, a lot of times, women's liberation and the ability of women to express all kinds of different desires, whether it's sexual, autonomy, whatever the case may be. And we've seen that evolve and grow. So this idea about giving voice to invisible fears and desires, I think you ask what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to use words, basically. But what did I end up doing when I grew up? I think it's looking at how people weave those invisible fears and desires into fiction, into news, into pop culture, into high culture, into low culture, into all of it. That's what I've ended up doing, and it's so damn fun.
I feel, first of all, you and I have talked at length about some of your lesson plans. I'll ask you a question about current events, and then you'll turn on the professor hat, because we'll just keep
I'm
going.
sorry. I'm insufferable. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine, because I enjoy that to a point, because you're not quizzing me. And
I don't have to listen or retain anything.
I get to listen, but I don't have to, like, I can miss a detail and not feel like you're going to be the person in every educational setting I've ever been in who's just going to look at my parents and go, he's like wasted potential.
He could apply himself more.
He could do so much more. It's literally, that's my educational background is, he's not living up to his potential.
Oh.
It's a common theme. I feel like when I got to set my own potential, like now I'm exceeding it, but everybody else saw that like I could do so much more. And I always wonder, like, I wonder what they would have had me do.
Just because you could, it doesn't mean you should, honestly.
Thank you. Because, Malcolm is a personal hero of mine. But aside from that, I had a journalism teacher who ran the paper, because it was a small school, and I would write for her a lot because I was not afraid to take on a news story, right? Like, I remember 9/11, and I was the first person to be like, I'll write about it. And I did, because I wasn't afraid to. Like, and I knew that if she stood up in front of the class, or even when I wasn't in her class, if there was a speaker coming to campus, like we had one of the Tuskegee Airmen come to campus, and nobody wanted to interview him. So I was like, yeah, I'll do it. But what ended up happening was when she found out I didn't want to pursue a career in journalism, I got in trouble because you're wasting your talents. It's like, well, I really enjoy being a big fish in this tiny little college community and being a writer for this tiny little college newspaper, but I don't want to do it out there, because I think I give myself way more credit in hindsight than I probably should, but like, I think I realized, because I had a friend who did journalism after we got out of college, and it's just like, wow, was I right that was not going to work for me in the real world, quote unquote.
Well, and I've certainly experienced that where a student I thought had such amazing, sorry to use the word potential, but potential as a journalist, as an educator, as a whatever the case may be, went into something totally different. Oh, you're going to law school. Great. But you know what? They have to love it. They have to feel it. And just because you're good at something doesn't mean you owe that to the discipline. You owe it to yourself to say, I don't like this. This is not where my calling is. Could I do more? Sure. Could I be a doctor? Could I be an attorney? Could I have been a physicist? No, Sarah Netzley could not have been a physicist. But, if that's not where my calling is, don't force it. It's not all about money. It's not all about prestige. It's about doing the thing that lights you on fire.
I mean, you have 3 things that light you on fire, and I'm kind of jealous a little bit. Because at the moment, I'm still looking for whatever that next job's going to be. And I mean, I've talked about careers on this show before, and would I like to make this a full-time gig? Maybe, but I really like that I'm not beholden to anybody here.
Are you somebody where the instant you have to do it, it becomes less joyful?
Okay, so I don't know the answer to that question. And because I don't know the answer to that question, I'm really scared of the answer. So the way it works is this, because I think it was maybe the first episode of the ID10T podcast, or maybe one of the last Nerdists, when Hardwick was discussing like some old stuff about like why he's not Nerdist anymore, and he sold the brand to a bigger company, and he's talking about it was his, but it wasn't his anymore. There were now corporate overlords, and like I'm, little me, like I don't have nearly the traffic or the follower that he does, but like as he's describing what happened to Nerdist, which was his baby, I'm like, oh, I'm never going to sell. Like, just because like, even though like good stuff came out of it for him and like good for him, I know that even though it worked out for him, he was still really like not sold on selling and like letting go of it. And because of the way I just viscerally felt listening to him tell his story, I was just like, maybe this is just something that is a side gig for me for the rest of my life, because while I could probably do it well, I think the only way I could do that is if I was making money without giving someone else ownership. And I think that that's hard. I think what's more likely to happen for any of us independent podcasters is like, maybe Spotify's like, we'll buy you out and give you money to keep doing it. But then you're not in charge. And like, that's where it becomes like, oh no, like, so like, that's where I don't know, like maybe it would be cool, but maybe it wouldn't. Right now I'm on an every other week release schedule. If I didn't have a real job, or at the moment wasn't looking for one, absolutely I could do it weekly, but would it be the same? Now because I have a little bit of time in between episodes. I can bank some and like I can bank 2 and buy myself an entire month to figure out what to do next. So I feel like in a way, maybe is the only answer, but I'm still kind of scared to like what might be. So it might be a scenario where I just play it safer just because I want to maintain control. I mean, for my blog, I could probably come in and tell your students how to make money by writing X, Y, and Z and getting ahead of the game, right? Because that's kind of part of the game, whether it's current news or just, licking your finger, sticking it in the air and trying to figure out which way the wind blows and just getting there first. But I'm not chasing that stuff, and I don't feel a pressure on myself to chase that stuff. So it's still fun. It's like, oh no, I'm going to write about this. That's great. So it's hard because this is I lump all of the Palmer stuff into one brand. So that becomes my one creative outlet. And if I lost control of my one creative outlet, A, I'd either have to find another one, or B, I just wouldn't have one and I would go insane.
Sure. Yeah. So that manifests for me in, of all places, book club, wherein maybe I was going to read that book, but the instant you tell me I have to read that book by this date to discuss it with 3 women I really admire and enjoy, I'm like, fuck you. I'm not reading that book. not doing it. I am so behind on book club this month. I have got to, and I do I want to read the Handmaid's Tale sequel? No, actually I don't. That sounds, I mean, it's going to be good and it's going to destroy me, but I don't want to do it on a schedule. I noticed that's where my worst tendency comes out. I will happily do what I have to do for the professor job. I am happy to do the recaps every week. I'm happy to talk to Ed once a week about all the DC TV stuff. I'm on my own schedule for the author things. You know, I'm setting my schedule. I'm setting my own deadlines. That's all very self-driven. But the instant somebody comes along and says, hey, read for pleasure and then let's talk about it, I'm just like, nah.
All right, but
I'm like a cat making strong eye contact and just knocking shit off the counter. No, I'm not doing that.
But ignoring that though, do you read? But you just read socially too, like just or recreationally. I
used to be a huge reader. Yes, I read so much. But the instant I started actually writing fiction for more than just, I think I can do this, I'm going to try. And once I realized I can do this, I am doing this, and I'm going to make some money doing this, it really changed. I don't have time. I don't have time to read. I read very little in the past, a year. I mean, it's been almost a full year, and I think I've maybe managed a dozen books, which is so low for me, insanely low. But my free time is, because I have the day job and then the recap job and then the podcast job. The podcast is not a job. It's for fun. But I mean, it takes up all my time. So any free time I have that used to be for reading is now for writing. And that's fine. That's great. It's a choice I'm making. It's fun. It's challenging. I'm growing as a person and as a wordsmith and all these things. But I don't get to read as much. What makes me sad.
When you were reading, what were you reading?
Tons of romance, obviously. It's what I write, and I think that's the best way to learn and to accumulate. And then, the big fiction that everybody's reading, the big summertime beach type reads that everybody's talking about, and sci-fi fantasy, urban fantasy. I was not reading as much of it in the past couple years, but I have been a big consumer of that genre as well.
Have you seen your reading change? Like, so I can go back to like my high school days. I used to read a ton of sci-fi, like Clark and Asimov were my boys. And I haven't read any sci-fi I've picked up maybe one or two of late, but no, like it's just not something I'm reading anymore.
I actually can, in the geekiest way possible, be very specific with that answer, because I have been tracking everything I read in an Excel spreadsheet since 2008. So
well,
I can track.
No wonder you and Ed are so simpatico on that show.
And yet we're hugely different too. Anyway, but yeah, so I actually went through, this was maybe 6 years ago, and charted, looked at all the different genres that I read and what's the increase and decrease. And I can see the years I was super into zombie fiction, ask me for recommendations. I can give you romance. I can give you horror. I can give you literary. I got your zombie recs. And so I can see the spike there, and I can see as my urban fantasy or as my sci-fi stuff sort of, rise and fall. And then, just the last couple of years, I've really increased my romance reading and across a variety of genres, whether it's, historical, contemporary, paranormal, dystopian, all those kinds of things. And that's really what led me to write, because I had one of those, there's such beautiful stuff in this genre, and there's some stuff that is maybe not as good as it could be. And I would like to see where I fit in there. I would like to see what I could do with that. So that's kind of how that started. But, I love me an Excel spreadsheet, and, that's how I tell you that.
It's come up on this show. Like, I have a detailed blog schedule in Google Sheets. Detailed. It's color coded, it's dated, it's organized. I can look at it I can just glance at it and go like, okay, so 3 of the next 4 posts are drafted, 1 is started, and 1 is outlined. Okay. All right. Solid. Good to go. But so I'm with you. Like, I think people use tools that are not necessary. Like, it gets overcomplicated. And I'm sure there are people out there that really enjoy it, but like Trello, too much. I didn't need it. Slack, I mean, I could follow along, but just give me like one thing. One thing is fine. It's good. Next year, new tab, done. And everything's historically saved. I'm all right. It's solid. Mm-hmm. I mean, the only way I've been tracking the books I read is because I write about them all now. So I can go back and see where I kind of started. And I started reading or making an effort to read after I started the blog. So you can see with the frequency that I put book reviews out, how much more I'm reading now.
And from what I've observed, and this is just me sort of as they float across my Twitter timeline, are you doing a lot more nonfiction now? I feel like I see more nonfiction from you.
What happened was I made a conscious effort about a year ago I was always mixing things up. Like, I'm still reading through all of Dayton's books, and I still have like 25 more to go. But I was going like Dayton, then non-Dayton, then Dayton, then non-Dayton. Like, I was trying to mix it up, and now I'm mixing it up a little bit further because I'm reading more of Terry Brooks's stuff, and I'm throwing in at least one piece of nonfiction in the rotation, right? Because I felt like I'm not one of those people that thinks like reading fiction is a waste. Like, I feel like you can learn just as much from a good piece of fiction as you can from a good piece of nonfiction. But I wanted to kind of be more of a balanced reader. And so the nonfiction stuff is kind of crept in. I mean, I'm really on this NASA kick, and it's kind of not gone away. But that's like the little kid in me coming back and choosing books. Like, no, I want to read about the rocket. All right. Okay. All right. I'll read another astronaut book. All right. Does that make you feel better? Yes. Yes, it does. All right. Okay. We're done. You know, so like that kind of stuff. And the technology books are always interesting to me because I still feel like you and I are talking on Skype, and we've got, you know, these USB microphones, and we're on, you know, probably laptop devices and multiple screens with phones, and all of that has a foundation somewhere. And I feel like because I've either made my hobby and my passion projects or my living off of these devices, I need to know more. Mm-hmm. I need to know where it comes from. Because to me, it's still a mystery. Like, I can code, but I still do not understand how a chip works. I've read books still. Like, that's just, it's like, it's never going to go in, or it goes in and out. I don't know.
I've accepted that I'm going to be ignorant in some areas. And that is one where I am okay for this computer to just work, and I'll just trust that it's going to be okay. But that's because I'm trying to level up and master other things. I just feel like at this point I have only so much time and elastic brain capacity left for me to acquire new ninja level skills.
I mean, listen, if you want to talk about that, I can tell you, I still know probably every magic card up through like 2000. And that's not information that's even relevant anymore, even if you're playing Magic. So like, to me, it's like, I really wish there was like a select all and delete for that folder, because I do not need that information anymore.
Do I have the lyrics to every song from every like popular Broadway musical in the 90s in my head? Yeah. Could I sing the entirety of Phantom of the Opera start to finish? Sure. Not well, but I could do it. Do I need those words in my head? No. Could I use that brain power for something else? Undoubtedly. Yeah. Also, if you ever want to devastate my husband, just whisper to him Black Lotus.
Why? Did he almost get one?
Oh, no, he had so many, and he sold them for so cheap before the market exploded. Oh. Mm-hmm. So he'll be like, I had 20. And then he starts thinking about what kind of retirement we could have. But I don't do that. I only do it if I'm really like losing the fight. And I'm just like, oh yeah, well, Black Lotus.
Yeah, no, I'm never going to do that. That's not, no.
You don't like making a grown man cry? That's fair.
No, it's mean. Like, I mean,
it is. I would actually never.
Because it's one of those funny things where like the rules of Magic have changed, and that makes me cry. Mana burn, come on, it should still exist. All right, I'm going to hold that. Like, Auntie, why not? Why not? Why not? Why not? Come on. Come on. You have a little faith in your cards. You think you're going to win? Put up something. Let's make it a gambling game. Huh?
What's your preferred D&D manual iteration? Like, do you have a preferred?
I still have the solid, like, good condition second edition hardcover books on my shelf. Okay. And the art from them is probably some of my favorite. Okay, so this is where the collector in me and the fanboy in me are at odds, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have Wizards based off of Ralph Bakshi's Wizards movie, the role-playing game.
Uh-huh.
But I don't want to mess up any of the character sheets or the book. But I really want to play that game. So I need to, like, invest in some Xeroxing, basically, and, like, bite down. But, like, that's where, I mean, right now we have a Pathfinder game. So, you know, I wish it was D&D, but I don't know. Pathfinder kind of overtook D&D somewhere while I wasn't paying attention. And, but yeah, no, I'm still kind of a purist with that. Like, you know, I mean, look, you married a geek, right? Like, has any of that, like, filtered in? Like, I know obviously, like, you're a geek yourself, but, like, every geek's different, right? So, like, how two geeks mesh, is always interesting. Like, I only have my experience with Steph.
Yeah, pre-marriage, I could not have talked to you about Black Lotus or D&D manual editions. That's not a geekdom that I came to on my own. That is something I married into. So, for sure. It's been interesting watching me absorb his interests and vice versa. We've been married for 100,000 years. So at this point, we kind of are the same gelatinous cube. Ha ha! Bringing it full circle. Because we just, you know, our interests sort of ricochet off each other, and we've adopted a lot of the same things. And it's why I could talk to you at length about pinball. That's not a thing that I started out interested in, but now some well-meaning friend asked me some simple question, and I came back into my body 30 minutes later and realized I'd been talking the whole time and answering her questions. And I was like, I don't know when I got all this information in my head, but yeah, I can talk some more about that. So yeah, it's one of my favorite things about marriage is the things about your partner that are so interesting that you find out when you're dating, you know, when you have kind of settled into that vibe, and then 20 years later when he busts out something and it's like, I had no idea you knew that or were interested in that, and it still is surprising and fun. Very cool.
All right. And I want to go back to your 3, right? Mm-hmm. If you have to give up one, what would it be? Money's not an option, because I don't want it to be like you have to stay a professor. Like, if you could only wear 2 hats and you would financially be in the same spot. You are really putting me on the spot here. It would probably be the recapping, because that is talking about what other people have done, which I enjoy. But writing, I get to make my own stories, and I get to call the shots there. And Professor, that is so important to me, to be a part of the conversation and the give and flow with students and with the next generation. So it's actually not that hard a choice, as much as I enjoy the recapping. Yeah, that would be the thing I'd walk away from, just because it is talking about the greatness of other people, or the lack of greatness of other people, depending on what I'm recapping. And I like the give and take in a classroom, and I like the ability to make my own. I mean, Ed, I'm not quitting, Ed. And I'm not asking you to. I just, you know, because there's I mean, we talked about it, but, like, I'm never giving this up. Like, if I have to go to once a month because, you know, circumstances did it, like, I'd go to once a month, but, like, I'm never giving this up.
Well, and I've definitely had weeks where I've thought something has to give here, because I am trying to juggle so much and I cannot keep doing all these things. And so you start looking at your life and thinking, what takes more time than I'm getting back from it, or, you have to look at the financial a little bit, what is costing me, in at least opportunity cost.
Or money, because how many streaming services do you really have, Sarah? All of them? All of them, right? All of them.
Are you talking like TV?
All of them. You have all of the streaming services, right? All of them.
No, I don't have all of them. I cut cable, I will say that.
Okay.
So that is a big expense. I do have a lot. I do share some logins for some others.
So do we, but we still have too many. Like, I feel like there's I'll go through and be like, well, that's an app I haven't opened and I can't remember when.
Yes and no for me. We don't do a lot of like music streaming, nothing like that really. Mostly it's TV, but even that, I probably could drop some. I probably should go through and look at some to drop because we're so busy. The TV time has decreased quite a bit and the movie time has decreased and yeah.
You still catch everything.
Huh? Do I?
I
don't.
I mean, it seems like it.
I keep up with everything, whether that's through social media and peripheral reading and podcasts that I listen to. I certainly don't. I'm not the pop culture consumer that I was 10 years ago. That's for sure.
Well, okay, but are you a news junkie? I'll just ask.
Yes and no. I will admit that since 2016, I have really pivoted to most of my news attention and outrage has been taken up by national politics. And so Jason, my husband, jokes quite a bit that I don't know anything that's happening locally. It's terrible. I'm a journalism professor and my local news consumption is not what it should be because I'm so hyper-focused on national politics and what's happening, nationally, internationally. So yeah, I am a news junkie. Twitter makes it much, much worse. And that sucks up some time as well. Yes? Does that answer your question?
It does. I mean, I'm always amazed at like a dinner or a function that I know as much as I do because I actively avoid it all. So like, I don't know how it's still like how I know about I knew about the test ban treaty and I knew about little nuances to Brexit. I don't know how. I don't know where I'm getting it. Like, I curated my Twitter feed as less than 200 accounts that I'm following to keep it A, manageable, and B, positive, because that's not something most people associate with social media. But still, somehow it all filters in. Like, I guess there's just no avoiding it.
It's in the amniotic soup around us. I think we're just so interconnected and we see trends and we see things that get shared into our timelines that we didn't ask for. No matter how much careful curation you do, it's bound to happen. But no, I'm with you. I'm that way with sports. I don't care about sports. I'm not. And yet some football player just retired today. That just happened. And, you kind of, these things filter in, whether you like them or not.
I mean, Ed talks about sports sometimes on your show.
Not to my face, he doesn't. He can sense my icy disapproval every time he does, and then he's just like, sorry, okay, getting back.
You've watched some sports movies, though.
Some, sure.
I'm just, I'm just saying it's there. It's another area. Like, is Jason a big sports guy?
Oh, God, no.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. Did you not hear me say he could be brought to tears over a mention of a Magic card from 1992?
Yeah, you could make me cry with certain things too. I'm still a sports guy,
No, it's one of the reasons I love him so much. He doesn't have any interest, and so I don't have to pretend to care. It's great. It's so freeing.
Meanwhile, in my house, I'm slowly but surely turning Steph into a sports fan.
Well, my friend Tanya is maybe going to move closer soon, and she's already warned/threatened me that if she does, I will become a baseball fan. She will turn me into a baseball fan. So, her team are the Yankees. My team.
No. You cannot associate with Yankee fans.
I can't. No, I'm sorry. I choose her. Even with her Yankees. I'm sorry.
All right.
But I've already told her if this is happening, I'm going to be a Cubs fan.
All right, that's fair. Yeah. My mother's a Cubs fan purely because she loves Chicago. That's it. That's all it took.
I mean, Chicago's the closest to me, and the bear is cute. Oh God, I'm such a.
All right. Okay. Hold on. So we're
sports.
gonna do this though, right? We're not done with sports.
Ah.
What happened a couple years ago, Sarah, to your little tiny college?
When my school advanced a little bit in the NCAA basketball,
they did.
Hubbub?
They did.
Uh-huh.
And were you have to at least culturally be aware of that it's a big thing, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yes.
what was it like? Because what happens to little schools that start to advance even a little bit is that even the people that don't care start to care a little bit.
Yeah, there's always some bandwagon jumping. But I think there's also a lot of Eeyores who are just like, whoop, this isn't going to last. this is going to end badly. At least me. No, it's exciting. I think, weirdly, the excitement I remember more of from around that time was the Cubs World Series run. Had a lot more in-class excitement than the basketball stuff for the actual team on campus. And I don't know if that was just the mix of students I had in my classes or my own interest was a little bit more tuned to baseball. I don't know. But yeah, I feel like that's where the excitement was. That's not a great advertisement for my school, I suppose.
No, it does make sense though, because you're near Chicago. And it was
a lot of our students are from Chicago, so that was just a big, that's their hometown team, and they just happened to be sitting in a classroom a couple hours south.
Well, I mean, I'll be fair. I'm a Baltimore Orioles fan, but the Red Sox breaking the curse, the Cubs breaking the curse, these two things were huge, even if they weren't your team. And I feel like even non-baseball people kind of knew about it.
I'm a non-baseball person who watched that last game of the series when they won. And it was an incredible game of baseball from what I understand. It was exciting. It was close.
It was.
I remember thinking, if this is what baseball is like, I'm watching more of it, but I'm assured that's not what baseball is like.
That's what a Game 7 is like. That's not what... Yeah. I mean, all I remember about that night was because it went extra innings and then it started raining and they had that little delay. And my mother calls me during the delay. And she's like, I don't know if I can stay up. And I'm like, you don't want to go to, you can't go to bed. And it was only like an hour later that the game actually finished. But I was like, you're going to regret, what I told her was, you're going to regret not watching it live. Like, yeah, you can watch the replay and that's fine. But it's not going to be the same.
I am so angry that you've just tricked me into talking about sports that I'm going to punish you by turning it around to comm theory. Are you ready? So I teach communication.
Oh man, I can see the comm theory book that I don't know why. Like I've purged some books, right? I'm never going to need my bio book. Every time I pick up my comm theory book, I'm like, I don't pick this up except to maybe try and get rid of it. And I can never get rid of it, but I haven't read it since college. So this is not going to be fun. But all right, fine. Let's do this. What do you got?
So there is a comm theory called framing, which talks about, in typically news, the aspects that you choose to focus on or omit in a story changes the way the public perceives the story and thinks about the story. So if you talk about, I mean, the classic example is like terrorist or freedom fighter. You can use a different word and that highlights different attributes. And that's how you think about and talk about, if you have, is it a riot? Is it a protest? Are they thugs? Are they activists? All those have different shades of meaning. Anyway, so I used the Cubs win as an example of framing in my class because there is this great picture that was on the front page of all the Chicago papers the next day of the team leaping on each other in celebration and jubilance, and they're all so excited. And so, you have this picture of jubilation in Chicago. And then the who did they play and beat for the first World Series? Who was that?
They beat crap.
So everybody listening to this is screaming right now. Okay, so Cleveland. So the papers in Cleveland that day had that same scenario. Like, they had the scrum of players, the Cubs players leaping jubilantly, but they had one of the Cleveland players like taking off his hat with such dejection, and it's the agony of defeat. It's the same picture. It's just a slightly different angle on it, the way they frame the picture.
Sure.
You've got joy and you've got, so that's the kind of thing I like to do. That's, I think, why I am a little more conversant about sports and things that ordinarily don't interest me, because you can find examples all over and you have to appeal to so many different students with so many different interests. So for me to be able to say, let's talk about literal framing. Let's talk about what, by just moving the camera 45 degrees, you have this whole other view of a different experience, and it completely changes the tone of the picture. So that's why I pay attention to stuff that maybe isn't always that interesting to me, because you never know what you can use to reach that student who's sitting in the back, just like I long for the sweet release of death in this class.
Yeah, but you know what? It sounds like your classroom would be one where I would at least sit in the front. Because like if it was a discussion class,
they're all discussion classes. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I sat in the back of my poetry class in college because I was like, oh, I'm going to write some verse and then I'm going to get told why it's not good. Sorry.
No, I'm wanting to make the joke about rhyming something with effulgent, because that's a reference to Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I just don't know who listens to this is going to get that, but there's your Buffy reference, y'all.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Listen, there are tons of, I want to dig deeper into this comm theory thing, because I want to know,
yes.
Is there like a part, so framing is a lot easier and probably, unfortunately, on the front page every day. Is there a part of that class that you enjoy teaching more than any other part?
Yeah, I mean, I teach a dozen or more theories every semester, and there are theories I like better. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Well, I mean, obviously the theory I use for my dissertation, everybody kind of has their OG theory, and I feel like your dissertation theory is going to be the one you refer back to. And my dissertation was based on cultivation theory, which was proposed by George Gerbner in the 70s. And he said that what is shown on TV becomes the real world for heavy viewers of television. So if you watch a lot of television, you believe that represents the real world, when in fact TV is much more violent, is much more sexual, is much more affluent, is much more white, is much more all of these things. And so if you are a heavy watcher of soap operas or news or whatever, it creates this buffeting ocean of imagery that you think represents the real world. The most classic way that this manifests itself is by an increased fear of crime and violence in the real world. If you watch a ton of TV, you are much more likely to overestimate your odds of being a crime victim out in the world than if you don't watch as much TV. It's the cultivation differential there. So if you're a light viewer, you have less fear of the real world than if you're a heavy viewer.
All I keep thinking, listen, you started talking and all I kept thinking was, does that mean I have a better chance of getting a portal gun like Rick has? Like if I just keep watching more Rick and Morty? Because I really want a portal gun.
Everybody wants a portal gun, but don't ever, ever go anywhere with Rick. That's a terrible idea. He will get you killed. Cultivation is not so much about specific shows. There are theories that talk about that. Cultivation is much more about the TV landscape as a whole and what it teaches us that as a whole TV is a little more, like I said, violent, blah, blah, blah. That's a little harder to talk about in 2020, though. That theory came about in the 70s when you had ABC, NBC, CBS.
Sure.
And the more fragmented you get, if you watch almost exclusively HBO Cinemax versus almost exclusively Fox News, holy God, you've got really different worlds that you're living in.
Does it work on a positive level? Like, because to be fair, every example you gave was negative. The world is more affluent, which to most people means everybody else has more money, and the world's more violent. And, does there exist a positive spin within this at all? Or is it just, we should stop watching so much TV because it's not doing us any good?
Wow. No, I'm trying to think of positive examples that I've seen in cultivation research. I will say the cultivation was proposed by scholars who were very concerned about television. So I'm not sure they were looking for the good. I love TV. I'm ride or die for TV, and I'm not sure TV is very good for any of us. So, there's that. That's not fair. That's not fair. There are important things that TV can learn and reveal and show, and I don't mean to be quite so dismissive of it, but I do think the research that I have seen, and I have not seen extensively all the research, so I'm not the end all be all on this, tends to focus a little bit more on the negative aspects. My dissertation was looking at whether depictions of LGBTQ plus relationships had any relationship with acceptance of LGBTQ plus rights, and specifically marriage rights. This was in the early aughts. So I think I was looking at something kind of positive social change. So yeah, no, there are, I just Midwestern you. Yeah, no, there's good stuff out there. I didn't find a relationship, BT dubs. My dissertation found that heavy versus light viewers didn't really affect your thoughts on legalization of marriage rights, and that it had much more to do with people you encountered in your daily life, friends or family who would, be taking advantage of those marriage rights, were much more indicative of how you fell on that scale, for what it's worth.
That's fair. I mean, I have to.
And this was like 2006. So I mean, this is social change moves fast once it reaches a tipping point, and we were reaching a tipping point at that point. So this is fairly out of date, but I'm still a doctor. So,
no, that's fair. You're still a doctor, but I want to listen. At some point I will have you back on this show, but I can't let your first appearance go without having you tell me why I should read romance. And I'm not trying to tell you to sell me your book, but like my mother, okay? Mm-hmm. My aunt, who is a retired college professor, my grandmother, may she rest in peace, who was a teacher for 1,000,000 years, it felt like a sick cycle. Like they would all buy a book and then they would read it and then they would trade off. And then they would trade off until they got the original book back. And then they would go to a used bookstore and they'd trade that one book in and get like 2 more. And then those would be read and cycled through the family as well. And I'm just like, what's going on?
I applaud their frugality. Okay, my answer to that is you, Jason Palmer. That's what I'm calling you now, Jason Palmer. I'm going to combine your 2 personas. Absolutely should not read romance. It sounds like it's not for you. I think you can try it, and I think I can come up with a variety of recommendations based on your interests and the things that kind of flip your switches that maybe would be better for you. But just like some people don't have the patience for space operas where people live on planet-sized ships, and just like some people don't have the patience for books with elves and dragons, I think there are some people
don't have patience for sports.
Exactly. I am not going to probably read some kind of oral history or written history of how there's how did ESPN come to be. I'm not the guy for that book. I'm just not. I think likewise, there are people who just don't have the interest for stories that center on emotion and love at the center of a story, that center those kinds of growth experiences. Not every romance novel is only focused on the emotional growth of the characters. Romance can be built around, mystery, suspense, horror, apocalypse, dystopia, all kinds of things. There's all kinds of settings where you have that romance story that comes along with it. But classic old school romance it's 2 people who find each other, who sort of fit, who grow together, who help each other become better, healthier, whatever the case may be. So I think there is no shame in not being the target audience for romance. What frustrates me, and this is a conversation that you and I have had, and I've had with 1,000,000 people in my life, is the quick knee-jerk rejection of romance as a worthy genre to stand among other types of reading. I think there's a very real sense that, it's garbage, it's trash, only dum-dums read it. This is the when are you going to write a real book question has come up, and I am very, very new in my romance writing career. I'm sorry, did I not write a book with words and with characters and plots and start finish with a cover that was edited? I think that's what's the word? Real book. right?
Yeah.
So there is in society an acceptance of automatic rejection of things that are by women for women, things that are perceived as feminism. We underpay in jobs that traditionally are considered to be feminine jobs, like elementary school teacher, like nursing. Obviously not only done by women, but the respect for those positions and the commensurate pay often reflects the feminized aspect of those jobs. Likewise, I think literature that foregrounds a female experience, and certainly, let me put on the brakes here, romance is not just for male-female. Romance is not just for straight love stories. We have so many more representations in romance and so many more romances with same gender, with gender fluid, with all kinds of things. So I don't mean to just say foregrounding women's experiences, but traditionally, historically, romance has put women center, women's pleasure, women's needs, women's sexuality, and all that stuff makes people uncomfortable. So I think it's really, really easy for people who haven't read it to just say, it's trash, it's silly, it's lightweight, it's not worth examining or taking seriously. There's garbage in every genre. There's stuff that could be better. There's stuff that is purely meant for disposable reads, for escapism, for what have you. So I guess to answer your question, why should you read romance? I don't necessarily think that you should, but I do think that you, and I mean you, but also the general you, should respect it as a powerhouse literary genre that represents like 50% of all ebook sales, that employs women, employs marginalized voices, employs editors and agents and freelancers who do cover design and build websites and all these things. It is a cottage industry that brings money into a lot of women and other folks' households. I feel like I'm running out of steam here. Did that kind of answer you?
No, it does, because there's two things I'll say. One of the things that hurts the argument you just made is, unfortunately, my mother's response when we pick on her. Now listen, my father and I are going to pick on my mother regardless. She's listening to this right now. She probably knows that, whatever. But my mother is willing to admit that some of the stuff she's reading is trash. And I'm not saying it isn't, and I'm not saying there's not a place for trash, but that doesn't help the stigma when people that enjoy it are still calling it that. Like, I get what it is. It's candy, right?
Okay. Save your second point because I want to address that first point. First of all, a little bit more comm theory. There's a theory called uses and gratifications, which says that we as humans choose the media we consume to satisfy different needs. I follow the news because I have a need for surveillance and for understanding, and I want to make sense of the world. I choose to read romance because I have a need for escape and I have a need for joy and optimism. And those books are... You are going to come through a tough time. You're going to have miscommunication. You're going to have hurt feelings. You're going to have cross signals, whatever the conflict is. But in the end, there is going to be a happy ending. That is romance's one promise, is that there is going to be a happily ever after, or at least a happily for now. And so my uses and grats for romance novels is satisfying that escape, that joy, that affirmation of good things happening to people. And so I think you have to understand what need it is fulfilling for people. And I don't think it's fair to hold up a need for escape versus a need for surveillance or a need for learning or what have you and say this one is better than that one. They're all needs and we're all meeting the needs as best we can. Number two, I think it is, of course your mom is like, oh, it's trash, because so many women for so long have said, oh, you read that stuff, that it is easier to laugh and say, oh yeah, I just throw away stuff. I just read it because I like it, whatever. Because it is hard to have this conversation. It is hard to say, why are you putting down this thing that I'm reading? Is it all high art? Certainly not. But I will say I have read romance novels that have challenged me, that have made me think about how I perceive the world, that have brought me to tears, that have changed the way I look at how people use language in books and in storytelling, and how they use narrative and how they use this and that. So there is exquisite elevating writing out there. And then there is, I'm reading a book right now that is fast and easy, and it's got all the tropes I love. It's got, oh my God, the guy she hates moved in next door. They snarl at each other every morning when she leaves for work. I'm into it. I need something fast and easy, and it's gonna tickle my brain, and it's gonna keep me going, and I know how it's gonna end, and I'm gonna love watching it get there. I'm gonna love seeing how this author tells the story and gets me from point A to point B. I knew what I needed, and I sought it out, and I'm not gonna apologize for that. So I think one of the most popular websites for romance novels is Smart Bitches Trashy Books. It is one of those things where I think romance readers have sort of taken that phrase that has been tossed at us. Why do you read that trash? Yeah, okay. If you're going to call it trash, we're going to talk about why we love it and how it's good and how it teaches women that our stories are valuable, that we could be the center of a narrative, that we can demand love and respect and a partner who values us and this and this and this, or that respects our need for, whatever, like, I'm trying to think. I don't want to criticize 50 Shades of Grey. I did not particularly care for that storyline or how it was written. I didn't think it was very healthy, but lots of women read it and loved it. And hey, man, if that helped them express some kind of desire, great. Good for them. So yeah, I think that rolling with it, yeah, it's trash. Sure. Okay. I'm reading kind of a throwaway book right now that's going to bring me pleasure that I need at the moment because that's the need that I'm trying to satisfy. But in some ways, I think it's one of those, the literary system, whatever the case may be, has looked down on these books for so long, it's just easier to be like, yeah, sure, trash.
All right, that's fair.
Point 2, hit me.
Well, the second point was, I think in the last decade, there's probably been 5 or 6 books I've read that have romance in them. Mm-hmm. And depending on how well it's written, I really like it, but it's not the focus. So I'm not saying I'm against romance, but like I'm okay with it as the B or the C line.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that there are some people who kind of feel that way about, I'm going to use dragons again. Like, I don't need dragons front and center in my book, but if there's a dragon in the background, that's cool. And I think that's how romance is for a lot of people too. I don't need that as the center driving narrative, but if the protagonist finds somebody who they think smells nice, and they want to go off of that person at points in the story, cool. So I think that's what frustrates me is when that romance is shoehorned in a way where the love interest is not well developed, is one of those, sort of flat, lifeless characters. I have found that to be the case with stories that have a lot of moving parts. That is a big epic, whatever kind of story it is, and you get a token kind of love interest just to keep people happy. It can be done really, really well as a D storyline as opposed to an A or a B or a C. But I think often the protagonist love interest suffers in that. And so often the protagonist is male. That means that we get a ton of, and I'm looking at comic books here kind of sometimes, sure. Sort of, where the love interest is a name and a short skirt, and sometimes she's going to end up dead to further the narrative and sometimes not. And that's what's so frustrating to me, is that sometimes when you have those things that are just sort of the background, okay, and here's a love interest, it's so generic. That's what I love about romance, because it makes these characters important. It makes that storyline matter. And so often that lady love interest is such an afterthought in some of those. And I'm not saying the stuff that you read, certainly not. I'm not criticizing your material. Yeah. But too often it's kind of an afterthought. That what I love is that romance takes those roles seriously and says, here is a person who is trying her best, or who has flaws, or who fails and picks herself up again. And she's meeting this person, or God, people, it doesn't have to be, there's a lot of different permutations of romance. This person who is also struggling and also has flaws and challenges. And so how do they negotiate that relationship between themselves, within themselves, with society? And I think there's something so powerful about saying these kind of stories matter too. And we don't have to put it as we don't have to attach it to the vehicle of we're saving the world, we're stopping the volcano, whatever the case may be. I think those can be done really well, and I love it when they are, as that kind of side story. But, and like I said, romance, a ton of romance has suspense plots or has save the world plots. Space romance is great. There's all these kinds of like space opera-y where you are falling in love with the barbaric alien race who, I shouldn't say barbaric, the heretofore unknown alien race who you have to try to figure out, and this and that. So anyway.
I mean, I do get criticized for it really, really enjoying Barbarella as a film.
I am a big believer in no guilty pleasures. I'm a big believer in what brings you joy brings you joy. And I am a big believer in, if you acknowledge that, okay, there maybe are some problematic aspects here, but what I love is this, you know what? Just go in with your eyes open and be willing to listen to other people saying, really, Barbarella? And if you have respectful discussion, but really, Barbarella?
So, read what you want to read and don't let anyone stop you. My mother doesn't let it stop her, Sara doesn't let it stop her, and I don't let it stop me either. Reading is a personal choice. Consume what makes you happy. If you want to learn about something, that's great. If you want to be entertained, that's great too. My actual blog is full of both fiction and nonfiction book reviews that I'm sure you can find something to read in there. And if my tastes across various genres and topics don't interest you in the least, you know someone who can recommend something to you. And, of course, there's always Sara and her zombie recommendations. But reading and romance were only a part of the story of this episode. We also talked about being creatives, although we didn't necessarily label it that way during the conversation. I've always wondered, and I've talked about it on this podcast, how people who aren't creators feel fulfilled. I used to come home from work and write a post or research a thing for a podcast or be on a podcast, help a friend, edit a post for someone else, edit my own post. Something that, while not maybe as tangible as building a chair, is something I can look back and say, I didn't waste my time this evening. I did something. And then, if need be, I could point to the exact thing that I did. Not that anyone ever asks, or that I ever needed to provide proof after the fact. Sara, as a professor in the scenario, is enough, but she goes home and she recaps television for a website and a podcast. She uses her time to write romance, and in that way, Sara and I are very much alike. The things we enjoy overlap a bit, but we are creators and creatives, and probably more than anything, we love the written word. But we also know how to wield it. We're both clearly talkers, as if there was any doubt, quote, something with words, unquote, with which to go into a career with fits the two of us very well, and something you'll clearly have an understanding of now that you've gotten to the end of this podcast. But there is no end in doing what you love. While there are processes that can be not the most fun, they balance out what is great about creation. So we do it because we want to create. So, I'll leave you with one question. What do you want to create? And if you haven't started, let me ask you another. Why not? Thanks for listening to The Palmer Files, Episode 12. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet the podcast at The Palmer Files, myself at Agent Palmer, and reach this week's guest Sara at either Sara Netzley or Sara Whitney _. You can hear her on the DC TV Report with her co-host Little Eddie O'Hare wherever you are listening to this show, and you can visit her websites, Sara Netzley or Sara Whitney, both.com, depending on which Sara you're looking for. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and remember, all of these links and those mentioned in the show will be in the show notes. The show email is thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. Drop me a line. Let me know what you think. Who are your favorite guests? What have been your favorite topics? What would you like more of? What would you like less of? I can't guarantee you'll become a producer of the Palmer Files podcast, but I will consider all ideas. In the meantime, you could hear more of me on Our Liner Notes, a musical conversation podcast with Chris Meyer, and my other gig as co-host of the Podcast Digest with Dan Lizette.
I do have a question. And it's because it's been on my mind because I always do icebreakers on the first day of class, which is super lame, but I want students to talk in my classes. And I know of no better way to do that than to make them answer some dumb question on the first day and get them used to just talking in front of everybody. And I think the question I'm asking this year is, who are your 3 picks for your apocalypse survival team?
Alive or dead?
Like dealer's
living
choice.
like
they can be living dead, they can be fiction, they can be nonfiction. Dealer's choice.
Wow.
I for sure am going with Bear Grylls.
Okay.
And this is not fair because I've given it some thought, obviously.
Yeah.
Because that dude will keep you alive no matter what. I feel like the Pioneer Woman, who is the woman who does like the cooking. She has the cookware and recipes. She's gonna know how to like, is that edible or not, and can she make it palatable? And then I always keep my third one open for how I'm feeling that day.
Wow. I mean,
and the apocalypse can be of your choosing. Like if you need to know that it's a nuclear apocalypse or a zombie or whatever, just okay.
Like I feel I want to go with Tony Stark.
Oh sure.
Because like, well, the Iron Man tech is fun, but I feel like a guy who can make an Iron Man suit could probably make anything else you forgot. Right?
He can make potable water.
I'm sure he could also like, oh, I don't have a knife. Oh, what do you need a knife for? I'm going to open this can. Oh, well, I'll just make you a can. You know what I mean? Like, all right, okay, good. Like, I have my inventor.
Plus, he is on the record as saving people, right? He's not just in it for himself for as much as he's a billionaire playboy. He really cares about other people. So you need that too. Sure.
I mean, I guess the other 2 are...
let's assume you've got Steph. You've got your like. You don't need to choose people you love. You can choose. Okay, they're already safe.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna go fiction. Then I might as well just go fiction. So like, we'll go Tony Stark, one of the Gilmore Girls, because I feel like I want to keep talking. I want somebody who's not gonna get sick of talking. And if you pick a Gilmore Girl, either right, I guess Rory's closer to my age. But I feel like we're not going to run out of shit to talk about. So I'm never going to get bored.
Is it weird that I would pick Emily?
Ooh, yeah. Or is it weird?
She will make sure we are living at a certain level. She will do what she needs to do to make sure we have like clean pillowcases.
Yeah, no. All
right, fair. Continue.
And a third, I probably would. This sounds like a cop out, right? But I probably go with Harry Palmer. I probably go with the unbond spy, just because maybe that will come in handy. And you know, at least as he's portrayed in the books, he's a very good cook. So that rounds out the trilogy. And he's probably
got great stories, right? Like again, you've got kind of a talker.
Yeah.
So
actually, all 3 of them are talkers. So like, this is going to be the best podcast that anybody who happens to encounter us is ever going to hear.
When you set up your recording studio of rocks and like vines, okay, talk into the rock. Check the level. Just the vines. Okay, we're good. Go.